Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's very special edition of It's a Peer-to-Peer World virtual conference. My name is Nuti, and I'm the Editor-in-Chief and Content Director of Nonprofit Pro, and I'm really excited to be your MC for today's conference. Today's conference is brought to you by 5 companies that serve nonprofits. They've come together to share their unique experience and knowledge with you. So the companies are Accelerist, Cathexis Partners, Charity Dynamics, Maureen Welbeoff, and Omatic. And to set the stage for today, the Peer-to-Peer World Virtual Conference is usually held each year in the fall, but we're bringing you this special edition today to provide you with some practical tips for virtual events and campaigns you can start using right away during this time when in-person fundraising events aren't really an option. We've had more than 1,800 unique RSVPs for today's conference, so it's pretty clear that our sessions are very much needed at this time in our sector. So welcome to the last session of today, and it is called Get to Know Your Audience for Real for Virtual Event Success. During the session, please feel free to submit any questions you may have through the questions tab in your GoToWebinar control panel. The speakers will answer the questions toward the end of the session. And also note that this session will be recorded and made available online after today's conference. And with that, I'll turn it over to you, Brittany.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us here this afternoon, the last session today of It's a Peer-to-Peer World virtual conference. My name is Brittany Hill. I'm the CEO and founder of a company called Accelerist, one of your hosts today. We're extremely excited to be here and round out the day with you guys talking about people. We have a lot to say about people, and we think it's probably your #1 greatest asset and the catalyst, if you will, to set your events and virtual events off for great success now, during crisis, or in the future. I have with me today an esteemed group of wonderful women. I'd love to introduce them right now. Kari Bodell is the SVP of Social Impact at CSM. Hi, Kari.
Hello there.
Thanks for joining.
Happy to be here.
And we also have Tracy Evans, right, Director of AIDS Lifecycle. Hi, Tracy.
Hi, Brittany. Hi, Kari. Hi, everyone.
Well, we're excited to get started. We have a lot of information for you around audience analytics and how organizations like Tracy's, for example, are using them to really propel and change the course of their events. Regardless of where, who, what source you're raising money from, it all starts for us with your people. And that's who really Accelerist is. To give you a little bit more context of who we are a partnership intelligence platform at our core that helps companies and nonprofits create or improve their partnerships with each other, their partnerships with their donors, their individual donors, their event participants. So we have a slew of services that help find new corporate donors through the largest social impact database in the world, help you price your event sponsorship opportunities, grow existing partnerships through our live reporting, and potentially the linchpin of our platform really is around our audience analytics and persona development, and to help you really engage your audiences in a deeper and more meaningful way, whether that is for your partnerships, your organization, your events, your programs, what have you. So we feel that, fundraising at its core is really about motivating people and offering them an opportunity truly to make a difference. Now more than ever, as you all know, we need motivation. We need hope. We need a purpose to make a difference and change what's going on in our world right now, either during times of crisis, a global pandemic, or on an average day, which I think we all hope and believe one day we will see again soon. So since fundraising begins and ends with people, that's what we're going to talk about today. How do we get to know, why should we care more about our audiences, and how do we get to know them more and put that information that we glean from our people to work to bolster our fundraising? So why should we care about our audiences? Well, one, they're the backbone of our programs, right? The people drive our programs, whether it's a virtual event, whether it's a telethon, whether it is a DIY program, whatever the case may be, they're the backbone of what we're doing. But they also can be, as we know in the peer-to-peer space, a lifeline, right, to more dollars. They can also amplify and help us raise awareness outside of sheer fundraising. They are our megaphones. They're also our loyalists. They're very loyal and our bread and butter. So we need to really understand who they are, what they want, what they're impassioned by, and some of this we might know already. Some of us might usually know kind of what our basic demographics are, maybe even their reason for participating or donating, potentially perhaps what their giving capacity is, or their amount that they're giving and how frequently they've donated and fundraised for this event or program, and maybe how much more they would do so in the future. But if we've learned anything over the past 5 years, whether it be from socio-political issues or huge movements like Black Lives Matter or the Me Too movement, or even global pandemic and more hopeful occurrences like the launch of videos on TikTok. The one thing that we've learned is I think people engage very differently and much, much more beyond just what their age is or what their demographics are. Their true experiences are so diverse now that their perception and their proclivity for attention and engagement is truly based on their own perceptions, their own experiences. And so we need to understand what those are, what those mindsets are. So what we might not know that we might need to know more of are things like their spending behaviors, their family composition, something called psychographics, which is a fancy word for just attitudes and mindsets. What are they motivated by? What do they need? And how socially influential are they, especially now when someone's social prowess, social connections are nearly 50 to 60 times more valuable now, right now in our world of virtual living and virtual fundraising than they ever have before. And so these are some of the topics that we're going to cover today. Perhaps my own professional and personal quote. Kari, I know, has talked a lot with me this year on the speaker circuit, if you will, and has seen this quote before, and I've sort of been using it as my mantra this year. But you'll see here, we can either step into and forward into growth or step back into safety. I would venture to guess that I might be a lot like a lot of you. I'm a dreamer, I'm a doer, I am passionate about doing good things in the world and want to do more tomorrow than I did today. And so using this philosophy, we really need to understand that our audiences and our knowledge of them need to go beyond the status quo. The understanding that we can have around audiences can support our ability to adjust our program strategy. They can and should support our ability to deepen our engagement with participants. These are our needs around fundraising right now, right? Audience data can help you raise more from your existing participants, donors, programs on the whole. It can even identify for you, who are you missing? Who are those other participants out there that still have a huge passion for your mission, but who you haven't yet connected with? And then sometimes, even most importantly, how do you validate some of the decisions that you have a gut feeling around, or you might want to debunk and sort of drown out the noise that you might be hearing from some noisy donors that might really represent only a small subset of your donor base. How do you use data and audience information to validate decisions and run them up toward leadership, validate those decisions that you need to justify the leadership, whether it's to secure more funding, whether it's to change an event from physical to virtual. Right now, whatever the case may be, data dispels all of those myths or gut feelings, unlike any other. So these are some of the needs that we'll talk about today. But before we do so, I want to shoot you a little bit of a poll and try to make this as interactive as we can. To give us a little bit of a baseline, I want to know, I think all of us ladies on the line, Kari and Tracy, want to know, do you think you have enough data right now on your event participants? I see some of the information coming in here. We see about a third of you have voted, so I'm going to give it a couple more minutes, get those answers in, so that we have a baseline from which to work and really understand whether or not you feel good about what you have right now. You might be sitting on more than you know as we go through the conversation. Keep them coming in. We have 60%. Let's get that up to 75 people. Come on. Okay. We're getting there. We're getting there. A couple more stragglers. All right. I'm going to go ahead and close it at about 70% of us voting at this point. And ideally, can you guys still see my screen here? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, perfect. Do you think you have enough data on your event participant? You know, 70% of us say no. Okay, we're going to talk a little bit later about what kinds of data you want to see and what you want to have. So let's go back. I think I can do this. Let's see. Maybe? Yeah.
You got it.
Look at that technology working. I love it. So perhaps one of the questions that we get very often is, well, you say we need to know more about our data, but what kinds of audience data, what kinds of analytics do we really need? Do we really need to understand? How deep do we really need to go? Or can we get by with what we have for now? And so in order to kind of demystify, if you will, the audience analytics and the categories of audience analytics that are most helpful, we think, in fundraising, you can see we've broken it down into 5 different categories here. First is situational. We'll talk a little bit about that. Demographics, I think we kind of know and understand: household income, you know, age, gender, perhaps occupation, basic baseline information. Psychographics, this gets into attitudes, beliefs, mindsets, etc. Multicultural, which is really cultural differences that have become so important to be sensitive toward, understand, and modify our communications and our event engagements around. And then last is interest and knowledge. How interested are your audiences truly in your mission? Are they just interested in your event? How much do they know? How much do they want to know about your impact? So with that being said, let's dive into situational role really quickly. Tracy, I'm going to sort of send this on to you, but this really is asking the question, why are these participants attending or supporting this program? Why are they here? Tracy, can you give us a great example of how you guys have maybe used situational analytics to understand why they're participating?
Sure, and I think I'll frame it with this. There was a moment in time when we used to all ask 1,000 questions in a registration form, and then we swung the other way because we wanted low barriers to entry for all of our events, so we quit asking any questions at all, and we would ask questions at the end. Well, we've moved back to asking a few really important questions on the front end as well as the back end in our surveys, and this is one of the questions. Why did you attend? What we found is that, you know, people attend for a wide variety of reasons. If you don't know what AIDS Life Cycle is, it's a 7-day bike ride that's 545 miles in California. So people attend because they're in for the mission, they want to see California on a bike, or they want a physical challenge. That's the bottom line. But what we learned when we were only asking this in the post-event survey is that people would have a 6 to 12 month training experience, they would be engaged with us, then they would have this immersive 7-day experience. What we learned in that was that we can't ask you what your motivation was when you started, when you've had all of this intense experience. So we ask, that is one of the questions we've added back into registration, and it gives us this opportunity to look at how good of a job have we done by the end of moving folks through and being connected to the mission. And I think that for me in this point is understanding why people start to begin with, but then understanding where they end up. There's magic there that can help you in aligning how you're speaking about the mission, how you're connecting folks to the mission, because ultimately, if we want them to come back and participate in the event and participate with the agencies that we support, they need to be involved in the mission at some point. So I hope I answered your question, Brittany.
Absolutely, yeah. Start with the why. That's in anything that we do, right? We gotta love Simon Sinek, but really understanding why are you here, and then we can treat you differently. We can communicate with you differently, put you in a different cadence, push you through the user experience in a different way. Absolutely. Bottom line, first and foremost. Secondly is typical demographics. Many of you might answer these questions or ask these questions in some of those initial program registration forms, whether it's self-reported. There are also other ways to glean that information that doesn't make that user experience cumbersome or provide extra friction that's not needed. And that is through either psychosocial analysis or a different type of quantitative analysis. That's obviously our strong suit and capability at Accelerist, but there are many other solutions out there. Some of you might even have them in your CRM and donor management systems. But demographics are basic, right? Who are these participants? How old are they? Social status, family composition, geography. Even things like social influence are now becoming part of a demographic profile. In this particular example, we worked with our friends at Susan G. Komen on their 3-day to analyze their demographics and psychographics, but in this case, staying in the demographic lane, help them understand who their primary participant was, a woman who's into health, fitness, stays up to date on current events, is of an average, sort of Gen X age, is married with kids, working mom, but she's also nearly 2 to 3 times more influential than the average nonprofit constituent. And so knowing that, they also combined that information with other data that they knew of their particular high influencers that were part of their participant pool, identified about 30 of them who were more well-connected, more influential, more active on social, and asked them to do a couple of different things when it came to asking friends and family, pushing out messages on social. I think it was 3 to 5 different task lists. And they ended up raising $200,000 more from 105 new participants, just from identifying and understanding 30 of their millions of participants, probably nationwide at the time, and significantly increased data. So understanding your people, who they are, where they are, how influential they are, has become a basic demographic knowledge and understanding that's necessary. So moving beyond demographics, we then get into a little bit more in depth, kind of that next layer, is we call it a psychographics. And this is really just, who are they? What are their attitudes? What are their beliefs? What are their values? So attitudes could be likes or dislikes, right? So that could be, are they book readers? Are they bike riders? Do they love Minecraft, or do they prefer playing solitaire? These beliefs are also basic assumptions about life, about the world. It could be spiritual, moral, economic, political, what have you, intellectual. And then our values are things that we hold dear, that we seem important, that we, have high regard for in terms of our own personal values, things like equality or honesty, education, perseverance, loyalty, innovation even. And understanding the psychographics behind that will lead you into what motivates these people. Based on their attitudes, based on what they believe, based on their values, then you can get to the prescription around the data and the application of that data of, okay, we now know who they are, and now we know what they're going to be motivated by. We know that they are motivated by the health and welfare of their family because they hold that as a value. They hold family values in high regard. They are motivated maybe by connectivity and a platform to communicate with their friends because they hold friendship and communication as a high value and have a nice attitude toward technology. So with that, again, psychographics from an Accelerist perspective, we've actually built indexes that help you analyze, and just launched a new tool to help you guys analyze not only who your people are, but what should we do with all of this data? So in an automated way, prescribing based on attitudes, beliefs, values, what are they motivated by? What do they need? How should we communicate with them? Because that's really the nuance. That's the 202, the 303 version of knowing your people and adjusting your strategies and communications accordingly, is this layer of psychographics that some have started to venture into, but might be new for some of you. Tracy, I'm going to throw it back to you and talk a little bit about multicultural. This is the question of how can we be sensitive to cultural differences, languages. Now that everything's virtual, we've seen a lot of events and programs go global that have never gone global before. How do we incorporate societal values and communication styles and consider that as we move forward? Do you want to talk a little bit about how you guys have approached that?
Yeah, we, you know, the ride itself is super diverse, but over the last few years, we've definitely seen a pretty rapid diversification, especially in some specific ethnic groups, as well as in gender diversity. And what has been interesting has been able to see through our survey process, actually in some of our most rapidly growing diversification categories, we've also had some of the lowest success scores. So it's been really helpful for us to identify and figure out why people would have such a different experience or have a less than satisfactory experience in these really particular areas. So you'll see there's a couple of photos here of things that we've been able to do that just highlight a couple of things that we've been able to do. One is in our Northern California region, we started an advisory group of for people of color, and that group put together a whole series of social experiences and training rides and things that are for this group to feel identification with, and it's been really, really great. Another thing you'll see here is just something that we've been doing a lot of virtual events to keep the community moving together, and beyond the ethnicity issue and the gender diversity issue, we also have folks who are from California who do the ride and folks outside of California who do the ride. And I think that's been a really interesting moment for us during the crisis, because the folks from outside of California are completely differently motivated, but also we need to speak differently and hold differently there. So it's been really interesting to see, and to see how it all play out from a data perspective in our event surveys, and to be able to ground in that where we want to move to and how we really want people to feel welcome, included, and part of this really magical experience. So we have been working to make the magic broader.
Nice. So Kari, the last area of audience analytics is really around interest and knowledge. I know that you feel really passionate about, understanding not only why, if we go back to the situational group of analytics, why people are here at this program or participating in this event, but asking how much does your audience know about your mission, your work, your impact? Are they even interested in being here? Do you want to talk a little bit about, interest and knowledge and the importance of that? And then I know, Tracy, you have a great example in terms of how you guys have understood the different types of subsections and segments of your audience when it came to how interested or knowledgeable even are your mission served in supporting population of your mission. Kari?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, first of all, there are two things that Tracy mentioned before when we're asking, why are you even here? And sometimes that has to do with, I want to see California on a bike. And sometimes it has to do with, I am passionate about ending AIDS. And then sometimes it's even one step further, and it's, I believe that these two organizations are the two organizations that will do it. So I think even as you're asking, why are you participating? You can ask, are you passionate about our cause? Or do you believe that our organization is the one that's going to get the job done? And those are two kind of different things. It could be that they don't care who it is as long as it's solving the problem that they care about. And we'll get into a little bit later how you actually take action on that. But not only what do they know about our mission, but what do they know about our organization and why we're the ones they should be betting on to solve this problem. I think there's also an opportunity up front to just think a little bit about all of our different mission pillars, and knowing that some organizations have one thing and that's what they do, but most of the organizations I've worked with have different aspects of their programs and their services that they're raising money for. So also understanding not just how much do they care about our mission, but which part of our mission do they actually care about? Do they have a loved one who is currently battling Alzheimer's? They're probably more interested in, what are you doing to help me and my loved one take care of themselves during this time? Where in a different situation, there could be more of a research focus or education focus. So also understanding which part of what we do people care about. Sometimes you can ask this again up front, and sometimes there are other devices, and I've just started a little list here of ways you can actually collect that data throughout the process. So maybe we can come back to that. And Tracy, I'll bounce it to you and you can talk a little more about your specific situation.
Sure. When we were talking about this idea that understanding interest and knowledge, something that stood out to me was we have this Venn diagram of folks who participate on the ride. We have folks who lived through the AIDS epidemic. We have folks who were not born during the AIDS epidemic. We have folks who are HIV positive. We have folks who don't know anyone who is HIV positive. We have young people, old people. And so we put together, we're going to show you a little clip, year before last, a video of conversations of where these folks intersect. And I think it really highlights that there are people who come for all different reasons. They're interested for all different reasons. And at some point they all intersect. So Brittany, I'm going to let you push the go button there.
I was in Los Angeles. I moved there in 1979. The first cases of HIV was 1981. And I remember very vividly when that started to occur and my reaction to it, which was fear.
Where were you during the first reported HIV case?
I'm not alive. I was born in 1991. I'm young.
I do remember Ryan White, and I do remember talking about it in 4th grade. I didn't really understand it.
I also lost an aunt to AIDS when I was younger. It was actually my first experience hearing the word AIDS or HIV.
I want to say it was like a Phil Donahue show or something in the 80s, but my actual first memory was I was a senior in high school. Oh, and Phil Donahue was on. That's why. My mom was behind me ironing, and I was just starting to come out, like just that idea of my sexuality being obvious and my sexual energy being coming forward. And I just remember my mom ironing, putting the iron down and saying, I don't care what you do as long as you're safe. And that was the first memory of actual how AIDS and HIV affected me.
I automatically assumed that because I was queer that I was going to end up being HIV positive. You know, my birth mother said the same thing. She said, you know, I don't want you. I don't want someone who's that way. You're going to die of AIDS. And then she hung up the phone on me.
For decades, I, for business reasons, did not get involved in anything that was associated with gay life. I was afraid of how it would impact my career.
So this is a 10-minute video, but we just wanted to show the first, and it's a fantastic and very inspiring video, to your point, Tracy, of how all of these perspectives do intersect for a common good and a common goal and a common cause. But as we can see from the first minute there, they all have very differing experiences, very different perspectives, and I'm sure, Tracy, you guys are communicating and engaging them in very different ways.
Yeah, you know, we definitely engage in very different ways, and we focus on, that's exciting.
Sorry,
we definitely engage in different ways, and the first cut and the first line is the veteran riders, so anyone who's completed one or more rides, and folks who are new to the ride. And that's probably very similar to everyone out there. Like, new folks are coming in with a really different set of eyes, ears, etc. So, and then from there it can be cut down even further by looking at, well, all of the things that we've just talked about.
Perfect. Well, you know, one thing that I think we all may assume after we've looked at maybe these 5 categories is that once we pinpoint and actually have the ability to pinpoint who our audiences are, we've got it, right? We cracked the nut. Yes, we got it, right? Well, maybe for that time. But I think for everything that probably the last 6 weeks or so has taught us is that, you know, who we are now and who we were as individuals or a group as of March 1st of this year are probably radically different. Our mindsets are different, our motivations are different, and our interest in giving and supporting and engaging social issues or anything for that matter, is maybe changing. Sometimes hopefully for the better. And so not only understanding, we really want to encourage you, whether it's a global pandemic or a natural disaster or presidential election year, but we want to encourage you not to just think this is a one and done type of approach to understanding your audiences, that we need to get a gut check. We need to reassess. We need to evaluate that audience on a recurring basis, whether that's annually or maybe in times of special events or critical issues and change in the world, because it does change who we are, it does change why we do things and why we support. So we have, as one of your handouts here, Accelerist just conducted a special report on donor opinion, donor response on COVID, really diving into the mindsets, motivations, and interests in supporting social causes during a global pandemic. As of, it was mid-March, so it was just a couple of weeks ago when we issued the study. And so it is one of your handouts. We're not going to go through the whole report, but we did want to sort of show you a couple of the stats that underscores that even though, let's say, over 2/3, 77%, most people are of a positive mindset right now during the coronavirus. You can see that on a demographic level, an age level, and a family composition level, those stats vary greatly. Women are 3 times more likely than men to actually have a negative mindset. Millennials are twice as more likely to feel motivated to take action than anything else and any other feeling. So understanding, the mindset and then diving into some of those subsegments are really important. Here's another great stat: over half people have already or anticipated a personal loss of income. Some family compositions, genders, demographics, age groups have experienced that differently, which of course plays into their current attitude toward giving. However, over half of them say they would still consider or love to give. So you can see how this changes, and you can see the nuances in some of the subsegment breakdown. They want to give to health as the #1 social cause right now, 2 to 1. But as you can see, when we take a look at some of the underlying segmentation, men actually prefer to support the environment and veteran affairs and arts and culture than women. Baby boomers prefer animal welfare over health right now. So I hope that underscores the importance of, we cannot lump everyone in together and take one stat or one data point and run with it and use it to drive our holistic strategy or communications for events or programs. We really want to dive into the underlying issue, the underlying subsect, who your people are in particular, and how they want to engage. In this case, volunteering time online right now is the #1 way, while over 1/3 still want to donate or raise money through peer-to-peer or overall individual donations. They also want to do other things like make masks or deliver groceries, or, I know that a lot of the speakers today have talked about creative ways to incorporate, new ideas by the people. Of how to incorporate that into your new virtual events. So understanding what motivates them, how they want to react, how they want to engage, not only as a huge group, but also what the subsegments of your own group look like is critical. Are we ready for poll #2? Here, we want to understand, now that we know kind of that 70% of you don't feel like you have enough data, we want to know what kind of participant data would you like more of? Now that we've talked about the kinds of participant data that we segment there, whether it's situational, demographics, psychographics, motivations and needs, the interest in knowledge, the multicultural, what are some of those areas that you feel like we're good on demo, but we need more of some of the other stuff? All right, I see 30% coming in. Let's get it back up to 70%, you guys. I know, we're almost to the near of the session. The end of the session, not the near of the session. Okay, about half of you have come in now. Let's get a little bit more. It looks like right now I'm seeing results that most of us want to really understand more about psychographics and the motivations and needs behind our supporters, behind our audiences. So I'm going to go ahead and close the poll out, and for the sake of time, I think we have a good response there. Hopefully you can see the results coming in and how they shake out. Did that come through for you guys? Not sure. Okay. Okay. Great. Let's see. Okay, are we back to the PowerPoint? Here we go. Okay. So with that being said, we want to now put all of this information to work. So whether or not you've been able to gather demographics, that's great. Let's actually talk about how we can use them in a deeper way. We might be setting on more than we know. So how can we put demographics, situational analytics, psychographics, motivations, needs to work? So first, we can apply this in a lot of different ways, whether it's for program strategy, whether it's to drive decision making when it comes to program user experience, our communications, the cultivation of our donors and our supporters and participants, and then even corporate partnership and sponsorship, which we can talk a little bit more about here in a second. So Tracy, I'm going to throw it back to you, and Kari, feel free to jump in here as well. When it comes to program strategy, what are some best practices on how you can apply audience data to driving your decision making?
Cool. Kari, do you want to talk about strategy first?
Sure, I would love to. I think there are a couple of big things that I always think of. The first one is taking our existing programs and making sure that those are evolving in ways that keep up with our audience. So like Brittany mentioned, we've just in the last 6 to 8 weeks had a massive change of the environment, and that can necessitate a lot of innovation right now. There are also more subtle changes that happen with our event participants and our supporters that we need to keep on top of. So just making sure that we're evolving our existing programs in ways that recognize that. We could have a program that is very much constructed for families. Do we know, as those families age out of this specific program, what they're moving to next? And are we creating the right kind of next step for them in our portfolio as changes occur in their life? Can be changing mindsets, it can be hitting milestones, it can be the person who joined the organization as a 10-year-old who was just diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, who's now a parent. So are we keeping up on our existing programs? I think the next one is when we realize with our knowledge of our data that we're serving a whole bunch of people with this program, but there are no 40-year-old single women who live in New York. Let's create something for that person. So understanding who we've got in the portfolio, who we're serving really well, and then identifying who we don't have and being able to create programs for them. One thing, and this is the last one, is just being able to pivot in ways that matter to your people when you have to. And I think, Tracy, that's where I'll pass to you, because I think seeing a lot of programs in the last few weeks say, like, here's our underwater basket weaving contest that we do every year, and then slapping a virtual sticker on it. And I'm going to be really interested to see how those work when all they've done is slap a virtual sticker on their thing that is not a virtual program. I've seen a lot of groups also do it really well, so I'm not calling everyone out. One program that I've seen do it, I think, best, Tracy, is what you've done when you decided you had to think about AIDS life cycle in a different way this year.
Well, thank you, Kari. And so you'll see on the screen AIDS life cycle, My 545. So the ride is 545 miles long. And we were really lucky that we had already started down a path of something called My 545 for our virtual cyclists, which is a really, really small group of folks who fundraise but don't come on the ride. And we were able to pivot pretty quickly. And the idea behind My 545 is people could do 545 of anything. I grabbed quickly some screenshots. That's me in the lovely orange wig last year on the ride. But basically, we put a challenge out to the community to keep fundraising, to keep moving, and to do whatever they could do. So what was really exciting was we started off with people, doing things like, oh, I'll do 545 push-ups, or I'm going to still ride my bike 545 miles over time, whatever it was. But then people started doing things like, I'm going to make 545 masks for my local community. We have one woman who is spending 545 hours working at a food bank, volunteering. And so it evolved to a larger opportunity for folks to do whatever they could do in the moment. And so it's been really exciting. And we took the bones of what already existed, we built it out, and we built some tools for folks. So in the slap it on category, we definitely have some pieces of slap it on, but we wanted to make customizable tools for folks. One of the things that we do know about our folks is that they are very, very present in social media. They like to have really fun and great pictures out. So this was a way for them to build their own assets, if you will, and customize, like the things that say my 545 my way, all of that is customizable. They could put, I'm making masks for my local community, and that's what could be in there. So we provided a few other tools for them, and we'll be celebrating them as we are working to create what the first week in June is when the ride is, or was, not this year, but we will have programming that week, and we're going to be celebrating all of the folks who continue to participate, and we're collecting some really cool stuff. So
I love that.
And Tracy, there's one group I can think of who on the surface, it looks like they just slapped a virtual sticker on it, but they actually have done a really nice job of updating all of their support tools, their communications, all of their materials. So even if on the face value, all you can do right now is say, like, our underwater basket weaving contest is now virtual. Make sure that with the support mechanisms that you're realizing that we're in a completely different world.
Right. You know what, one of the things that we did immediately was we had a video call with our community, and we laid out that we were revising what our goals are. The fundraising hit at a really critical time. So both of the agencies that the ride supports take a really big hit in the operating budget. So we really pared down what the goal was, talked about what it is, and we don't usually have a thermometer on our homepage. We now have a thermometer that's really about that goal, and every day we update it with the progress we've made and driving all those other things. So.
Yeah, and what it sounds so simple is I love about that example, and what you've done with my 545 is you listen to your people, you let them choose how they want to engage right now. And that sounds like such a simple concept, but absolutely critical, whether it's bringing this event virtual, but I think, based on offline conversations, you guys are going to continue that same mentality and trust of your supporters moving forward in whatever iteration is next. For the sake of time, looking at our next section here of how to apply audience data, this example is brought to us by our friends at Charity Dynamics. Kathy Kempf joined us for a roundtable earlier this year and shared this example from Komen, where, bottom line, understanding those personas, understanding their motivations, their needs, and walking through the user experience journey to customize what that looks like. So first and foremost, got to uncover what those needs and challenges are, right? You can see the roadmap that they've created to help those different types of personas that are driven by different things make faster, more informed decisions based on their needs, personalize the different experiences to what motivates those supporters and what they connect with, whether it's a returning fundraiser, a survivor, so on and so forth. And then conditionalize the content, right? So look at your communications, create different conditions for maybe your top fundraisers versus maybe a survivor who might be new to the program. And the way that they fundraise might look very different, and therefore their user experience, whether it be online, through registration, through peer-to-peer fundraising, or even at the event itself, whether it is virtual or not, should be really customized for your core personas and audience segments. Moving into the next area here, program communications. Kari, you want to talk just quickly about, I know we've touched on some of the segmentation opportunity, speaking of conditional content. Anything you'd like to share here?
Yeah, I think, going back to the first survey where 70% say we don't have enough data, sometimes square one is this data that you definitely have. And it's situational data, but there is so much potential with the data that is right in your basic participant report. Are they new or have they been around for a while? How long have they been around? Have they started fundraising? How much have they fundraised? Are they in your top tier? Have they, and I know not all of our systems can report on things like this, but have they sent emails from their centralized system? Have they customized their pages? Those are just little signs of life that say, like, of all my people, these people are actually doing something. Thinking about if they're team captains, if they're on a team, or if they're solos. And then also just making sure, again, back to our connection to what we're even doing here. And, we say like use segments and use conditional content. And I know that some groups are dealing with really robust systems where you've got teams that help you. And here's where I get a little bit out of my depth, but they help you customize your system so that with a push of a button, a team captain gets a different email than the non-team captain with different copy than the returning team captain. I mean, there's very sophisticated stuff that can be done with really sophisticated systems. If you're not there yet, though, you have a treasure trove of data, even with just an Excel document, sort it and send some manual emails based on the data that you already have in your systems.
Yeah, and building off of, and that's a great segue into building off of that, looking at those who are supporting you the most, those who are greatest engaged, those high potentials, as we say here in best practices. A great example of that is pinpointing who those are. Special Olympics of Missouri, in this case, it's a great example from Blackbaud. Our friends at Blackbaud used their own target analytics to identify a group of 3,500 people that they wanted to focus on cultivating and increasing a certain monetary amount of gifts. And so when they did that, when they cultivated them, they found just in those 3,500 people, sent specific communications to them and helped them increase those gifts by nearly 200% by just a nuance of different types of positioning, communication positioning. So start with what you've got. You don't have to do it all in the same day. Start with those baby steps, but try to look at your data differently and make different and more targeted decisions when it comes to communication. Tracy, Kari, over to the experts. Cultivation, gosh, if we look at that 80-20 rule, right, of the folks that currently support you, that's where the majority of your money is going to come from. How do we use data to help with cultivation throughout the year?
Wow,
this is one
that session.
I know. I was just going to say, I've got at least 3 hours of showtime on this one. There are two big things I'll say then, Tracy, hand it to you for some specifics. Be sure that you understand how your organization treats major donors. At what threshold does somebody become a major donor? In big organizations, it may be they have to buy a hospital wing. In small organizations, it may be $1,000. Understand that threshold and then apply the same thing to your peer-to-peer fundraisers. A good friend of mine is a public school teacher, and he could no more write a check for $30,000 a year, but he and his team raised $30,000 a year for, actually, I know there are some of you on the line here, for one of the organizations here today. So be sure that you understand the true value of your peer-to-peer fundraisers and make sure that you're treating them just like you would a major donor, because they're responsible for that same amount of income. And they actually are probably doing a little more work than just writing a check. I think the second thing that again, call me later if you want to talk about any of this, because I love talking about this. Make sure you're treating your peer-to-peer donors differently than you're treating donors to your organization. I know I just did Cycle for Survival and I got a bunch of donors who may not know the first thing about Cycle for Survival or Memorial Sloan Kettering. They gave because I asked them to. And when those donors get dropped into a fundraising stream, I know that with Memorial Sloan Kettering, they are getting communication that acknowledges the door that they came in through. we know you donated to Kari through this fundraising event, when they just get dropped into, and I'm not calling it, I'm saying Memorial Sloan Kettering is doing it right. Sometimes they just get dropped into the massive donor communication. They don't even remember who they gave to. They remember that they gave to your participant, to your fundraiser. So in the interest of time, those are kind of my big two punchlines: is treat your fundraisers like you know their true value, and treat your donors like you know the door they came in through.
I couldn't agree with that more. And I would say, just from a practical perspective, what we do on a day in, day out basis is we have an acknowledgement process for acknowledging folks at certain levels, the same as if they were making a big gift. We have CEOs making phone calls to them. We also build and have a weekly moves management process with our frontline staff that really is just like you would have moves management in donor development. And the final thing I was going to say was, in this emergency, we really looked at and divided up, especially our top tier folks and those folks who have the highest investment in the organization and the highest, reaching the highest and have had past proof of being some of our top fundraisers. Those are folks who got direct connection from me when we were making the cancellation. Those are the folks who we really put the high touch service on for everything. And that continues in the emergency, because those are also the folks who have been stepping up the hardest and the fastest to make sure that the mission is going forward. So I think we've had a really interesting internal conversation about, there's the folks who never got off the mark and they're not going to, there's the folks who are at the top end, but man, this middle 60%, there's something there. It's kind of like the undecideds in an election, right? Like, if we can figure out the best way using all of the different analytics to move the hearts and minds of folks in that middle 60%, we can make some movement too. So hope that helps.
Thank you. Yeah. Well, sometimes we, focus, and should, rightfully so, on participant revenue, but in a time where maybe participant revenue is maybe declining, we don't know, a lot of uncertainty out there around individual fundraising. Corporate sponsorship could and should make up about 20% of your event revenue. Corporate support right now is actually at a height, even in a sense of emergency and a crisis. And so when it comes to using audience data, you can also think about using it to leverage and secure corporate sponsorships. So if you think of and can analyze and find out through psychosocial analysis, various tools that you might have, what brands do they love? Those might be great right fit prospects for you. Those might be great sponsors to incorporate into matching gift opportunities through virtual events. Special offers from companies that are looking for opportunities right now to actually align with nonprofits. Did you guys know, actually, from a search engine marketing perspective, that nonprofit search conversions are up by 20 to 30% right now during the crisis? So companies want to be a part of what you're doing, and using who your people are and understanding how to position that to a company can make magic. A great example here are our friends at Big Brothers Big Sisters of America. Actually used their data to secure 6- and 7-figure sponsorships from Nordstrom Rack and the NFL, because they figured out, hey guys, our people shop at Nordstrom and they love the NFL, so let's talk. And oftentimes those marketing dollars that are coming from marketing sponsorship departments are sometimes easier to justify with data. So with that being said, we want to encourage you guys. Here's that grand landscape that we just looked at. Hopefully this is a great infographic for you to reference back, a good go-to of the needs that you have in a typical event or program at your organization, what kinds of audience analytics you can focus on, check off the boxes. If you have demographics, start next on psychographics or situational or multicultural, and then really try to apply them to every facet of that program if you can, in just a little small way. So with that being said, we have our last question, and then we want to hear questions from you. Now, do you feel like you know or would know how to apply more data, now that we've gone through this process, to your more data on your participants? Do you know how to apply them? So let us know what you have here, and let us know what you think. As you guys are submitting poll questions, we'd also love to hear questions from you on anything that we've covered, if you'd like to hear more about it. Kari, while we're waiting on that, I think there are a lot of questions coming in. I'm gonna shoot this over to either Kari or Tracy. When you have a variety of ways to make an impact through an organization, what suggestions do you have to not compete against yourself for an audience with your cause?
I love this one. Do you want to take it, Trace, or you want me to take a first swing?
Take a first swing and I'll add in.
Okay. I mean, I love this question, and I think there will be times that you are competing against yourself, and I would say that's fine. Understand that every program can't be everything to all people. I promise you there are people in California who care about ending AIDS who are not doing AIDS life cycle, and that's fine. We've built a specific program for them. I think a lot of times our walk programs become, I sometimes call it either the front porch or sometimes the yard sale, because everybody tries to get in on it. And when you're creating something that serves every mission pillar, you're really diluting your potential message. So I would say, if you can, and again, not knowing how big or small or well-resourced your organization is, just understanding that even if you have a broad program, it's going to be serving different audiences at different times, potentially in the cycle. And don't hesitate to create a program just for one mission pillar and say, we're designing this for our people who care about this part of our mission. And they're different than those other people, and those other people can go do something else. So I wouldn't hesitate to get very clear about what the strategic purpose of the program is, and understand that sometimes our programs compete against each other, and that's fine.
Yeah. So there are a lot of
totally agree with that, 100%.
There are a lot of questions for you and some of the systems that you're using. So I'd love to follow up with them after the webinar with some specific messaging. But with just a minute or two here left, one question I think would be interesting for the entire group is, how do you engage an audience who isn't familiar with or comfortable with online or social media platforms in today's world?
Can you ask it again? I'm sorry.
Yeah, so if there are certain audiences that aren't as familiar or comfortable with online or social media platforms, if we have, let's say, a virtual event, how do you engage them? How do you approach them?
So we communicate a lot with our audience, and we communicate through multi-pronged. So we do a lot of email, and we do a lot of email, we do a lot of social media, and we use multiple social media platforms, but we make sure that we are reaching people in a variety of ways. It's such an interesting question. Most of the folks who do our ride are very involved in social media. There's a small percentage that's not, and we reach them definitely through email, but then sometimes not. We had someone who, if you can believe it, 2 weeks after we had canceled the ride, I got a call from someone asking why he hadn't been told that the ride was canceled. And but through all of our best efforts to reach everyone, and of course the first thing we did was emailed everyone first. We had social media presence about it. But sometimes the email doesn't get through. So we also use the phone. But you know, in the changing world, more and more people are using social media. So we don't use it exclusively, but it's definitely a heavy part of our plan.
Yeah, and I would add to that, Tracy, I think for traditional programs where we're actually showing up at the same time in the same place, wearing the t-shirt, waving the flags, there are lots of things you can do to facilitate offline recruitment and fundraising. I think with the virtual programs that we're creating, and this is another thing where I would be pretty strident, I would say, give yourself permission to not worry about engaging people offline with a virtual program. The virtual program lives online. It is dependent on technology, and you could drive yourself crazy trying to figure out, how do we get grandma who always comes to the walk but all we do is call her. How do we get her involved in this new virtual thing this year? Cut yourself some slack and realize the virtual program you're building this year is not for everybody. And there's going to be a whole bunch of people that don't migrate to this. Can we create something else for them? Maybe. But within the context of improving a virtual program that we're creating in response to COVID, I wouldn't worry too much about the audience who isn't familiar or comfortable with the online tools.
Of course, I just had a vision of, remember some of you weren't even born yet, but when the March of Dimes used to have walkathons and we would have our envelope, we could send folks some envelopes to get there. Do their donation. There's still neighborhood programs and things like that.
There are a lot of different ways to encourage people to engage. We are 2 minutes technically over time. We appreciate most of you hanging on. We will answer some additional questions through the chat box or through the question and answer field. We've started inputting some of those already, but we'll follow up with you guys. We will send you slides. And then we have 2 handouts here that you can download. One, that special report that I mentioned, and then another just quick takeaway, another approach for applying audience analytics against and throughout the event participant journey. In sort of closing, I just wanted to say, I personally, I know Kari, Tracy, we thrive off of innovation. And many a pundit has expressed right now and expect a lot of innovation to come out of this crisis. But, like Steve Jobs, I think once said, innovation is the ability to see change as an opportunity, not a threat. And so let's harness this time. We want to encourage you to harness this time to look at the opportunities, especially with your people, to better understand them, who they are now, what kind of purpose do they want now, and how do they want to be inspired right now. How you engage and really communicate with your people right now will dictate whether or not they will support you for life. So we encourage you to find out more about them. Please reach out to any of us, post this conference on Twitter, on LinkedIn, wherever, to get any other expertise on either how to understand them better. I know Kari had some great tips that maybe we can follow up with you guys on how to collect that type of information. But bottom line, do a little bit more digging on your people and understand them tomorrow than you did today. And we encourage you to go forth and conquer with your people. Thank you all for doing what you do every day and for having us this afternoon after a long virtual conference. Thank you, Kari. Thank you, Tracy, for joining and lending your expertise to what I know we could talk for hours and hours and hours about. I appreciate your time today as well.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, thank you, guys. Stay well.
All right, great. Well, thank you so much, ladies. What a great session. And so this pretty much concludes the virtual conference. So thank you everybody so much for tuning in and hanging out with us for the day. I hope you got some useful nuggets to take home to your organization to ramp up those virtual peer-to-peer events. So on that note, we will be sending out the sessions because they are recorded. But other than that, have a great day.